Well, welcome to another episode Out of the Bank podcast. I'm here with Mr. Mike Payne.
How you doing, man? Thank you for allowing me to invade your space.
Invade my space. I like that. Well, Mike, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? And if you want, what do you do professionally or just what you want to talk about?
I'm Mike Payne. I'm the host of the Ethically Immoral Podcast, which is a podcast for spoken word artists, poets, and authors, primarily focusing on up and coming spoken word poets, authors, and spoken word artists. We air every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Central Time. Outside of that, from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, uh, early 40s. I work for um, a company that prepares evaluation reports for foreign students. We basically evaluate their educational documents and provide the equivalent, the U.S. equivalents of their
Well,
education.
what
But
made you want to dive so far into like spoken word? Because I think a lot of people really don't. I mean, I just think it's underrated, to be honest with you. I never really truly got a good grasp of what that was. Mostly like my whole family's musicians, so I like to correlate it to a little bit of songwriting. My family can write songs, like my brother, for instance, can write a song like it's nothing. But for me, it always came in like stanzas. It came in a formation like a poem. Whenever I would think of a lyric, I could never think of it just like without that beat. Like it'd have to have like, and the flowers of the, and then it would just go like that. And I think in movies it gets kind of just like I guess shown in a bad light on the factor of you ever see 21 Jump Street or 22 Jump Street where he's like Cynthia and he's doing slam poetry and he's like screaming.
yeah,
That's funny, but like I never like I don't know. Sometimes like for me, like I like poetry. I write it sometimes when I'm really confused because I sit and just marinate in my thoughts. And sometimes you want to put what you're expressed in your head onto paper. And like for instance, for me, I remember sitting in this room that I'm sitting in now before the blacked out curtain behind me. This is a window behind me. So I lifted up the window in the middle of the night. It was an insane thunderstorm and I was hearing the rain pitter patter on the street, and words just started flowing to me in such a rhythm and such a form that I was like, I need to write these down. And I think when we say spoken word, words have such an impact, whether we use them on a daily basis in the way we talk, but they can be crafted in such a way that can literally leave a person breathless.
yeah. I mean, I totally agree that words are powerful. Uh, Man, they can be sometimes just as impactful as being physically whatever. It can hurt just, I mean, words can just have that effect on people. To answer your question, I'm not a spoken word artist per se. I share my poetry out loud from time to time. But I'm fascinated with creativity, man. I have been for a long time. I started writing when I was, well, at least in 2005 is when I started writing poetry. And it was a way, like you mentioned, when you were looking to, you were marinating on things, and or if you were confused and you wanted to get it out. So for me, writing or poetry specifically was a way for me to get thoughts out, to express feelings, and um, to put words to whatever emotions that I was feeling. And actually, poetry, I didn't even think about it as poetry necessarily. I wanted to write in poetic form because I like the creativity and I like the challenge of writing it in a certain way. Um, and I was amazed by how it allowed me to express myself in ways that I normally would not have expressed myself. Um, it forced me to internalize a lot of things, and it brought out a lot of different thoughts and emotions and feelings that I didn't even know were present at that time. And so I've always been fascinated by how it resonated with me. And then when I talk to poets or spoken word artists, Um, I am intrigued by their creativity, what inspires them to write, or what was it that what was it that made them depend on poetry, that form of writing, to express themselves. So spoken word specifically, to be able to then express it in a certain way that resonates with audiences
A way of
is
like kind of like a reflection of one's soul, kind of in a way. You get to see what a person is either A, experienced, or B, what is going on in their life. It's like an inner insight into somebody, much like therapy, instead of a full on analysis of something. Most of the time, this is a form where somebody can write it out and be able to express what's going on, their thoughts in a rhythmic pattern that makes sense. I mean, I never truly loved it or understood it until I was in college and we got this reading assignment, and it was I'll never forget the poem. It's one of my favorites. It's Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden Frost. And for me, having ADHD, reading a book is like, fuck this, like just toss that behind me.
right. Yeah,
But
yeah,
when I was reading this poem, it talked about how cold it was outside, being under the covers and just seeing the blue lit up in the room of the snow that was, the frost that was crackling on on the glass. And I could envision it in my head. I was like, whoa, like I've never seen this before and I've never felt this before. And then, you get to read different poem stylings and different types of things, whether it's rhyming or whether it's not rhyming. Seems like for me, like I like a Dr. Seuss book where it does kind of rhyme for me to be able to
right.
pick it up.
Yeah.
But it's it's amazing, man, to be honest with you. I know it sounds like cheesy in saying that, but for a lot of people, they don't understand. And like when you're interviewing, let's say, a spoken word artist, what do you typically try and analysis? Do you usually let them, read a poem to you first and try and pick apart of what it meant?
Not necessarily, because again, for me, it's more about what is behind, not necessarily a specific piece, but of what's behind the creativity of the creative. So when I guess, look for um, a guest, I first of all look for consistency, and consistency in respect to, um, does that specific person uh, present their words in a way that uh, that can hold attention, that can resonate with people. So it's not necessarily the subject matter. But going back to what you were just saying, I'm not necessarily concerned with, like, if I'm at a spoken word event, I'm not necessarily looking to find out what this specific person went through personally. It's how that the way that spoken word artists um, presents their poem or their spoken word, does their performance resonate with me? And what's great about poetry is that, and then I guess transitioning into spoken word, what's great about it, and this goes to your point about therapeutic purposes too, and I talk about this with guests as well. It it it's therapeutic in a way that, yeah, we all experience different traumas, we all experience our specific situations, so we individualize it, of course. But a lot of times we believe that we're the only people that are experiencing these situations. And so to hear someone express a similar situation uh, allows us to understand that this happens to other people as well. And it allows us to then be open to discussing whatever it is that we went through with other people, because it may force you or may want you to find out, well, how did you get through this? How did you sustain your sanity? How did you overcome this obstacle? Or what are you doing right now to get through it if that person hasn't gotten through it? So when I look for guests, I'm looking for consistency as far as how it resonates with people. I'm also looking uh, for um, their um,
Like a
willingness
like a
to share.
realness factor.
Well, yeah, yeah, a realness factor. Um, Not necessarily does it sound authentic, but um, does the situation that they may be talking about be realistic? So it may not necessarily have to be something that they personally experience. So, for example, I've written about things or situations that I personally haven't gone through, but of situations that I know friends have gone through or family has gone through. And a lot of times when I write that way, I will put myself, or at least imagine myself or the character in that specific situation and what I would personally do. How would I personally feel if I were going through that? And then I just allow the feelings that I may have to then dictate how that specific poem is going to end. So a lot of times I don't even know what the ending is because I don't know or I don't have an agenda. I just allow the feelings and the emotions that I experience to take over, to dictate the pen and where it goes.
Could you
So,
give me one of your poems that you've written? Like, could you read one off to me?
yeah, give me just a moment. So, and I don't memorize my work, so I'm gonna just take a look here and bring something up for
Yeah, literally, I have because once you do that, it might give me the courage to actually read off some of
us.
my own here. But I bought my cousin got me this book a long time ago. And he literally, what you just said about you don't memorize your own words, for instance, he wrote this on the front page of my thing. He said, "When something comes out of your mind, like out of the blank, write that shit down." And I
Yeah,
put it on my first page of the thing, so I always open that up and look at that.
yeah, man, um, and really up until the well, I'm in Wisconsin, is where I live, so we went into, or there was a stay-at-home order that was placed like at the end of March or something like that, maybe early April. And up until that point, I really didn't even like share my work in a sense of performing it for people. I would share my writing on websites or whatever, but so I really didn't have a reason to memorize uh, my work because I didn't have an aspiration to be a spoken word artist. I'm a fan, and so, but anyway, so this poem that I wrote is called "This Time," and basically the story behind this is I am referencing poetry as a person, so as a woman in this particular case, and um, I've been writing poetry again since 2005, but I haven't been consistent with it. Uh, I would use poetry a lot of times to get things out, as I mentioned before, express whatever frustrations I was going through or whatever. And then when I would feel better after a period of time, after I would feel better, like I wouldn't write anymore. But I always find myself relying on poetry to get me through whatever emotional situation or emotional period that I was going through. And I felt like after a while that I was using poetry, that I was um, taking advantage of her and the way that she can make me feel whole again. So that's the premise behind this piece. So again, it's called This Time. I'm ready to commit to you, submit to you, admit to you that I haven't always been grateful for you, But on those fateful days when I'm feeling some type of way, I call on you, rely on you, expect you to take me back, forgive me, and help pick up my slack. And when I feel better, just like that, I'm gone again. Push aside my notebook and sit down my pen with no intention to use it again until I need to use you again to make me feel better. Promise that this time I'm going to do better. When you're turned on, no other form of writing makes my paper wetter. And you believe me every time, evidenced by every resulting sentence, paragraph, and rhyme. So here I am, one more time. No pickup lines, no lies. I'm asking that you simply take me back, please, my poetry. So that's that piece.
What's the thing they do is the
Yeah, the snap.
the
Yeah,
snap.
yeah,
Damn, I don't even want to share mine now, dude. That was really good.
yeah.
I could
Uh,
really sense the pain and how you like the emotion you kind of felt when you were saying how you feel like you were using it. Like it
yeah.
made it sound like that in the beginning. I was like, is this one of those dirty stories I wasn't allowed to read when I was a kid? But you really crafted it out in my mind, man. It made me kind of like think a little bit about how we can honestly use a lot of things as a form of therapy, but are we using it in our own nefarious purposes and not giving the respect that it deserves at times?
Exactly, exactly. And
See, I listened to you. Look at that.
did
That
a
was a
great job.
nod of acceptance.
You did a great job, man. So yeah, but like you said, a lot of times where we seem to take advantage of situations, or in this particular case, kind of take advantage of people and use them to heal our pain or make us feel whole, as I mentioned. And so that's how I felt about poetry, because I felt bad. I felt like, man, I'm using this and not giving it the appreciation and respect that it deserves. So I've so far kept up my end of the bargain as far as like remaining true to it and appreciating it and focusing on it. And part of that was or is because of the podcast, which I started or picked back up uh, during quarantine. I didn't have a reason not to do it. There were only excuses for me not to start this podcast again. So yeah, that's that piece.
I think, especially with your podcast, where I was so just drawn towards it, is because you can see a million true crime, you can see a million movie reviews, and all these ones that are so popular nowadays. But you chose spoken word and poetry, and I think that's a fine audience that listens to that. It's usually a specific group. It's pretty niche, and I think it's an underrated one as well, because of the fact is the way that if you honestly took the time to listen to an actual poem, you would be moved just as a lot of people that are following you have been moved. It just takes I mean, we live in a fast-paced society, sad to say it. Everybody's rushing around thinking about the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, like 10 steps ahead. Live in the fucking moment, man. The fact
Yeah,
of you need to walk outside and hear the rustling of trees in like you need to hear that. You need to smell salt air. You need to, be aware of your senses. Sometimes like for me ADHD, I'm running all over the place, but like when I feel like I'm really stressed out and I can't get focused, I always just grab a hold of something that has extreme texture to it, like this coffee table that my computer and stuff sitting on. It's got holes in it. It's got knife marks and it's got coffee stains in it. I like to feel that. I like to feel the tingleness on my fingertips. I like to know that I'm freaking alive, man. I had a
yeah,
moment the other night where I slept on my arm for a full day. Dude, I woke up. I thought I was going to have to chop the arm off because I did not feel it for an hour. I swear to you, I was
yeah,
pinching it. I was so scared. But
yeah,
it's about that sense of realness and that connection that, I mean, we all are connected to each other with a sense of empathy, and it doesn't take much to tap into it, but it's been lost for so long because we've disconnected from the things that make us human, our passions, our wants, our needs, our drives. And during coronavirus, it was an opening to a doorway that a lot of people need to keep open and not shut again, with the returning to work scenarios. But we're people. We need to be around each other, and the positivity needs to come back to bring an era of just change, man.
You're right. And one thing I like about just creativity as a whole in whatever form of writing or art that you use to express it is that it, well, I guess I'll go with poetry specifically in this particular case. It um, it forces us to be appreciative of who we are and of other people, whether or not it's a positive poem or what we would consider a negative poem. A lot of times it's about self-discovery, it's about introspection and coming to terms with who we are and what we like about ourselves and what we don't like about ourselves. A lot of times, or it's said that the first step to recovery is admitting that you have an issue, admitting that you have a problem. And so, writing and art and again, poetry specifically makes that happen in a lot of instances. And it then it starts the foundation for us to grow if we decide to build upon that foundation. It keeps us humble. It reminds us who we are, and then in regards to what you were talking about what coronavirus has done, yeah, everyone was separated physically. But the thing that I like about, and I on the podcast I've said this a few times, one of the positive consequences, at least for the creatives that I know, or the poets specifically, or spoken word artists, is that it forced us to look for that that passion that we have for this specific art form online. So whether that's Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, uh, we it allows us to, or it has allowed me specifically, the opportunity to connect with people that I would not have connected with any other time. If things were open, or if Corona never happened, there are a lot of people that I've met online that I would not have met. Period. I wouldn't have a reason to, because I wouldn't have the the feeling of need to look for these different creatives in these particular areas. So while I'm not necessarily physically able, at least at the moment, to connect with them, by being in person, I am able to uh, forge or build some sort of relationship with different people with different interests, even if the common denominator is poetry, but with different interests and different perspectives uh, online. Again, whether it's through Instagram or Facebook or whatever, or Twitter. But yeah, coronavirus, man, has, I mean, again, that's one of the few positive consequences from corona.
It's given
Um,
me a better intro and inflection, I would say, into my own life. If you would have told me before Corona that there would be a time where the gyms you wouldn't be able to go to, I had gone every single day for 8 years. I still have gone every single day, uh, but I ended up having to build a home gym. I mean, I got a
yeah,
Smith machine. I got all this stuff in my garage. It's just sitting there useless. And now that's where I work. I work at a fitness place. So it's like,
right.
hey, there you go.
Yeah,
But it was an insight to me, like, you don't need to kill yourself over something and learn to enjoy life. Just it was hard for me to come to that realization, because it's my form of therapy. It kept the demons away. And I think
yeah,
with COVID, that's what scared a lot of people, was it showed you those demons. It showed you those things that you had been neglecting, those things you loved from the very start. I know so many people that started their own businesses after the whole staying home thing. They decided they wanted to do endeavor in hot sauce, or endeavor in a coffee company, or endeavor in something, and take that risk in that shop, because 20 years working for a company just went down the drain in a matter of a day.
yeah,
And I always talk shit on technology on the factor of I think it has lost the communication aspect between people, but I see the benefit in the way that it's able to help me and you connect. And
Right.
also the fact of I've had writers of blogs come onto my podcast and I've turned a 2 hour episode into 45 minutes because the guy just he had really bad anxiety. He warned me about before coming on, and I edited it down because I told him, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to make you look bad. I'm here just to have a conversation with you. If I have to spend a couple hours editing, I will. But he was so afraid of it going up. I sent it to him before and he loved it. And then he wrote a
Yeah.
blog about it. And I've seen this guy's writing. And the best way I could describe it was I had my uncle on the podcast a while ago, and he's an announcer. So he goes into the baseball stadiums, goes, stepping right up to number 3 with, and then he does that whole thing. Well,
Yeah.
his dad is a famous and published author. And he goes, some people have different forms of expression. Some people are very good with their words, and some people can't say a single thing. But the best way my dad has been able to communicate me is not through his mouth, was through having pencil onto paper. When I read his stories and I read his thoughts, it's something I would have never imagined coming from my father. And when I heard that, it really opened up my eyes because when I look at these blogs, I thought it was just a place to figure out where to get the best seafood or where to get the best whatever. It turns out they're people writing their thoughts, emotions, and
Yeah.
stories.
And
From things that involve sex. I've known a couple of people that write called like a lady killer blog, where it's a woman writing about sexual things that she experiences, and they call her Dr. Love. And then I know a guy, shout out to Cody Sexton. He's a thin slice of anxiety, and he writes down all his emotions that he feels and things that he goes through on a daily basis. And it helps people be able to relate. I mean, the fact of you had to look, and you would rarely find somebody that thought and was going through something that you're going through and has overcome it. In the real world, are you kidding me? Going out onto the street and coming across that one person that has everything in common with you,
right. Yeah.
but now they have the internet, and now you can just Google what you want. If I have to Google, why is my poop red? There's 50 million people that have had the same issue, and it gives you a
Exactly.
better outlet for an answer. And
Exactly.
I think that's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah. And as I mentioned, poetry is again one of those outlets that allows us to connect with people who have experienced or who are experiencing situations that we have gone through or we may be currently going through at that particular moment. And I mean, it's great because again, we as a society are more individualized than we were at another point in time, and so we tend to think that everything is um, revolves around us. I mean, um,
It's a rat
there are
race, man. There's too many
yeah,
people out here trying to be a part of a competition and losing the sense of what we call empathy. I've talked
correct,
about for so long. We basically replaced our feelings with just needs and wants. And it's like, yeah, you're supposed to need things. You're supposed to want things, but when you lose empathy and you lose communication for complaining, what is happening? It's like, honestly, if you asked me how I felt going out into the world when I was a little kid, I would have said it's a warm and wonderful place. Well, now when I walk out into the world, it's not that it's cold and dark, it's just it's numb. I don't feel things like a person should feel things. It's not me as a person. It's just everybody. We're on mindless autopilot. You can tell when you walk and try and have a conversation. I mean, before even coming on to this podcast, you asked me if there was certain topics and stuff. And I said it's conversation. And you could probably tell right now I'm in this thing. I'm not going anywhere else. Honestly, I'm too afraid to show you what I wrote on this book after you reading your poem off. But you know, you can tell I'm here. And I'm like, we can all tap into this. Everybody has the ability to have a conversation with somebody. It's about taking the time and then being able to do that and actually being there for it. I mean, you can tell in the street if somebody gives you an autopilot answer and that's how's your day going and they keep walking.
right,
That's not being there. I want same thing you probably want when you're listening to a poem is you want to be able to not relate maybe, but just get drawn in. be able to find that, okay, this has got me. I don't know what you're going through,
Absolutely.
but I'm here to listen. I'm here to stay. I
Absolutely.
want to find where this ends.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly right. I want to connect with that particular person, regardless of, right, whatever the situation they may be writing about or, talking about. Because we all have, again, our individual circumstances and situations that we're going through, whether we perceive them to be negative or positive, or if that person who's sharing their work believes that they're negative or positive. But it's about connecting with that particular person. And in my particular case, words and creativity resonates with me, typically the most. And I do want to touch on something that you mentioned because I think it's important. We were talking about this a little while ago about how COVID forces us or has forced us to really look at ourselves, and it happened pretty much within, or at least it started pretty much within a day. And you're right, because a lot of times we're so busy, we take so much time to do other things, we avoid things that, or situations that we may be personally experiencing. We tend to use different activities, whether it's work or whether it's different hobbies that we may have, that keeps the attention away from whatever it is that's bothering us. And what COVID has done by forcing us to be in the house, now we don't have those outlets anymore. So whether that's going to the movies or out to eat with your friends, or depending on where you live, going to the gym, and in a lot of cases going to work. Now you're at home, whether it's alone with your thoughts or with your family, that now you're tired of seeing because you're with them every single day, all day long. But COVID has forced us, right, at least the opportunity to face ourselves. And a lot of people, unfortunately, don't like what they see. They don't like what they have been running away from.
I made a
And
tweet on that exactly what you're saying. I had tweeted out that why are people complaining about masks when you've been wearing one your whole entire life? We never
correct,
want to show our true person, our true selves. It's always got to be expensive things in this false persona. And I'm like, hang on a second. I just want that sweatpants confidence where I walk into a store with sweatpants on and don't really give a shit, like,
right,
but
yeah,
everything's got to be, I got to do this, I got to do that. I don't want people to see me like this and that. I'm like, man, I remember back in the day, I used to care what everyone thought about approving everybody and wanting everybody's acceptance and all this. And then once at one point, I was just like, why am I doing this? Why am I caring what someone is going to meet, 5 minutes when I walk past in a store or something?
right,
Why is anybody going to care? But it all stems back. I've talked about donations, man. I know it sounds crazy, but I think, I go to Home Goods or something in the store. You could buy like decor or whatever for your house, or buy, food, whatever you want. They have a thing where like you can donate your 2 cents to whatever to help this. And then once you donate, they ring a bell, but they let everybody in the store know you donated. And I think that's wrong. And I always tell the woman, don't ring the bell if I'm donating 2 cents, because nobody knows how much you're donating. They just know you're donating. So then everybody looks for that acceptance. I'm like, why are we so obsessed with acceptance?
right,
You're not gonna,
right,
and not every, I can tell you right now, not everybody in the world likes me. I honestly, if you do like me, God bless you. But
right,
the
right,
whole factor is, we're so obsessed with being liked, being wanted to be the best, want to be the top dog. You even know, diving into the podcast industry, the whole fact is it's a competition factor. Everybody wants to be number one. It's all about
right,
followers. It's all about listens. I'm
right,
like, I'm sorry, I'm not into that. It would be nice if 10,000, 20,000 people listen to my show. But honestly, the conversations I pulled with amazing people like yourself that are out here doing something that a lot of people, like without technology, we would never know are doing. I've never been to a jazz club. I've never been to a poetry session. I would love to go. But at the same time, the fact that it's all online, able to experience that as well, because a lot of people do have anxiety where they can't go out and experience things, and it's not their fault that they have that. It's the way the world is turned into. It's a nasty little monster. It needs to go back to a sense of wholeness. I don't feel the same feeling I get walking out into the world, like I said, when I do when I'm a little kid. The world is, it can be changed. Everything's got to be a rat race, though, and I don't like that. And there's people out here like yourself that are not in a competition with anybody. If you were in a competition to make the best podcast, you wouldn't have chosen spoken word. And that's not me offending you. That's just me saying I could start a true crime one and I would get quick up there. It's because it's popular, it's trending.
Right.
But I love doing this way more. I love
Exactly.
this than I could ever do with true crime.
Exactly. And I am the same way. And I've even mentioned this on the podcast that it's not about numbers. That we don't determine success or define success um, by downloads or by listeners or you know or the reviews that we receive. Don't get me wrong, right? Would I love 10,000 downloads? Of course. Would I like all 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts? Of course. But this specific podcast is for, well, a couple of reasons. One, I'm a fan. So when I'm interviewing or having conversations with um, the guests that I have, my questions are coming from a fan perspective. Like, when did you start, and what led you to start this, and why are you interested in that, and a bit more sophisticated questions than just those. But so there's that. But a lot of the guests that I have, they typically don't have a platform like a lot of these more recognized, well-known spoken artists or poets do. So I want to do what I can to help build their brand, to help build their audience, to help sell whatever, whether it's a book, a chapbook, a CD that they have, or if they just want more people to experience their words. So for me, it's I guess it's selfish in a way, in the sense that I'm getting my fix by talking to these different artists, but I look at it from a selfless perspective. And right, it is unfortunately now all about downloads or followers or likes. And people, the one picture that we see may have taken them 20 minutes to post because they didn't like the angle, or what are they going to think that I didn't smile this way, or
No
maybe I
duck
should
face,
smile that
bro.
way.
No duck
Exactly. Oh
face.
yeah, 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 yeah. You're right. Yeah, yep. And so we don't know, when we're on social media and we see these pictures, we don't know obviously what their lives are really like. We don't know how long again it took for them to get that perfect pose, or at least what they think are perfect poses. And so
It happened when we replaced our heroes, these people we used to idolize as kids, the superheroes, all these things, and we put our faith and what we love and what we consider leadership in celebrities and people that are popular on Instagram on the basis of I want to be just like them.
right.
They're only showing you the good things. Who goes on social media and posts the bad things? Like, why would you post how crappy your trip was in Hawaii? You're going to talk about how beautiful the scenes are to make people jealous and want to go out there, but also show people like I party. It's the same thing when you're scrolling Instagram. What makes me sick is when I come across like a friend of mine that's posting a picture at a bonfire and they have a beer and they're holding it up like they're advertising. I'm like, are you just trying to show people you party? Like, I don't get it.
Exactly.
Like, that makes me sick. Put it down and enjoy the moment.
Exactly. Exactly. I remember when I was growing up and I would see these advertisements, like for in print advertisements for like cigarettes. And um I remember a teacher of mine, I was like in the 5th grade or something like that, he was saying like, most of those people who are in those advertisements and has a cigarette in their hand, they don't even smoke. You know what I mean? It's just it's there to uh get you to want to be in the position that they're in. So we associate cigarettes with happiness because there's this guy and this woman laughing on a jet ski or whatever it would be, you know. So but I agree.
Shout out to my Facebook picture. Holy shit. It's me with a cigar in my mouth.
There you go, right? Yeah. But at least it's in your mouth though. So at least
Worst fucking experience I've ever had in my life. Nobody tells you that's a sit down thing. I learned that one. I was freaking trying to drive at the same time, enjoy a cigar. I'm like, can't even get the thing to light. And next thing you know, my
there you
cousin's
go.
like, you want to watch a sunset? Freaking went down in 5 minutes. I'm sitting there with half a cigar, like, well, this was a waste of money, but I love
Yeah,
cigars.
there you go, man. So but yeah, this the culture and society has changed in such a way where yeah, we're putting emphasis on unrealistic expectations. And I'm not one to to tell someone not to strive for greatness, but or perfection. But we have to, as a society, redefine what success is and
People have
what
told me I
perfection
say
is.
so many things in a podcast, and a lot of them should be written down. So I'm going to say this because I just thought of it, and I think it's pretty spot on. It's not about how many people remember you, it's about who remembers you.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And
Boom.
yeah. And how you're remembered.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so yeah, I agree. But what I do think, just going back to COVID for a little bit, or if we're going to expound on it, we can. But uh, there's a new normal now. I don't believe that we're going to go back to what normal was. And I think right now, with the rising numbers of COVID cases, and now unfortunately uh, the higher or the rise in uh, percentages in death now over the last few days, it's a reminder that um, we need to reevaluate how we are going to live, because with the attempted reopening in so many different states early, like Georgia and Florida and Texas, you're seeing that their numbers are, well, more specifically Arizona, Texas, and Florida, their numbers are outrageous. And so this is going to be a new normal. We're going to have to reevaluate things and how we live and how we are going to view each other and the world as we know it.
I think it's going to make
So,
it a lot colder, sadly. I think it's going to turn into what
really,
China has dealt with. It's called a social credit system, where basically you get a tax break or you get a certain amount of money from the government if you snitch on your neighbor if they're doing something wrong. And that's kind of what we're seeing. Like in my town, people are calling the cops on other people not wearing their mask, not
yeah.
doing these other things, and that gives them an entitlement. But how far until the government starts just paying people to snitch on others? It's going to lead that way. It's turned into a tattletale society starting to form up if you don't wear a mask or if you don't do this. And it's honestly because we don't know what to do. We're lost as people. We've been lost for a while, but now we're really starting to realize, like, holy crap, we're living in a new normal, but no one knows what that new normal is. We're trying to function. Some people get sick of it. Some people want to stay with it. It's turned from Republican to Democrat to now mask or no mask. And it's like, we're in a divide, man. I don't think it's going to get better right now. I think it's going to get a little bit worse before it does. But I think people are going to start hopefully taking account of what this was and really starting to look at the values of things. I'm hoping families are going to start having dinners again, mostly because we weren't able to go out to eat for so long. And now we're like, oh shit, that was. Remember when we used to do that? We used to sit around and just laugh. Like,
Right.
why was Netflix so much more important than having a dinner with you? And then I hope that comes back. But it's we're in some crazy times, man. I don't know what's gonna happen coming up, to be
Yeah, I
honest with
think
you.
I and I see it a little differently, and I'm not sure if I'm necessarily more of an optimist than you are, because I don't necessarily believe that I am. I think I'm more of a realist than anything. But at least I see the opportunity for things to get better. I agree that things are going to get worse before they get better, just because I believe that eventually, in many states, uh, there are going to be stay-at-home orders again. Because unfortunately, the reopening in a lot of areas didn't work, and numbers are rising. So I think in many states there's going to be another lockdown. So I think it's going to get worse from that perspective. I think that, um, like you mentioned, unfortunately, COVID has become political, and you have 50 states doing 50 different things. So there's no continuity, there's no consistency. Sometimes within the same state, there are different counties in the same state, there's no consistency. But I do think that because we are uh, forced to be together as far as families are concerned, and um, we have to connect with people in different ways. And because we are forced to confront who we are as individuals, that is going to provide the opportunity for us to grow as people, as a culture, as a society. And I think post COVID, if there is such a thing, um, that it has the opportunity to um, bind people together in ways, or connect people in ways that um, it hadn't before, or that we weren't before. So hopefully it's that way. But I think I believe we are in agreement that it is going to get worse before it gets better. People say this is the second wave of COVID. It's still the first wave. We didn't do we didn't complete the first wave. Um, so yeah,
You never know what you have until it's gone.
right. And unfortunately, a lot of people are finding that out now. You know what I mean?
We never
A
know
lot of
when to
times.
fix something until it's at a red line, sadly.
Right, yeah. We never individualize it or personalize it when it's with other people. It's not until that situation, or that scenario hits home, whether it's us personally, or friends that we have, or families that we have, other family members, that it really puts things into perspective. So hopefully things will get better from a societal aspect.
I hope so too. And at least it's given me the chance to meet such an amazing person, Mike. I really do appreciate you for coming out and doing the podcast, man.
Hey man, thank you for again inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, man.
I want you to plug your podcast, plug your show, plug your Instagram, everything, so people that are listening can find your content, man.
So on Instagram, I am at ethically immoral. Again, that's at ethically immoral on Instagram. The name of the podcast is the Ethically Immoral Podcast. Uh, you can find the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. See, and on Facebook, you can just search Ethically Immoral Podcast, and will pop up. And again, we air new, we call them chapters. We air new chapters every Sunday night. So tonight, the new one, chapter 13, or well, no, chapter 11. Sorry about that. at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. So definitely listen.
Why ethically immoral?
It's funny. I So my personal writing website before I.com did was I think it was morally unethical or something like that. Um, I thought that was uh, a clever name. And then when I started the podcast, I got it mixed up. So now it's ethically uh, or moral. So actually, there's no rhyme or reason behind that.
It
Actually,
sounds better, I'll tell you
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I apparently I thought it did too, so I went with it. So there's no rhyme or reason. There's no specific reason. I just needed a name, and that was different, and so to capture attention. But I need to really focus on coming up with a better answer to that question the next time somebody asks me to make it sound like I planned it that way.
I
So thanks for
think
putting
that's,
that
I
in
think,
my mind.
you know what they say, Bob Ross says, is everything's just happy little accidents.
That's right. That's right, man. That's right, man. I like Bob Ross.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode Out of the Blank podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode.